The stagecoach smelled of wet wool, cheap whiskey, and old fear. Lily Crawford kept her hands clenched in her lap, the thin fabric of her Missouri-made gloves worn through at the knuckles. She had stopped feeling the cold hours ago. It had moved past her skin and settled deep in her bones, a frozen, heavy thing that matched the dread in her gut. The coachman hadn't spoken since Flagstaff. He just spat tobacco juice into the graying snow and cracked the whip. They were climbing now, into higher country. The air was thinner, sharper, when the wheels finally slowed, groaning in the ruts of ice. The man barked, "End of the line. Blackthorn Ridge." Lily peered through the cracked leather flap. It wasn't a town, it was a scar. A handful of rough-hewn buildings leaned against a frozen hillside, dark smoke clawing its way from chimneys into a sky the color of dirty iron. A wide, churned road of mud and ice served as its main street, bracketed by a saloon, a general store with a boarded window, and a few nameless shacks. She was the last passenger. The drummer from back east had gotten off at the last stop, giving her a look that was half pity, half appraisal. Now, she was just a woman, alone, arriving in a place that looked like it ate women for breakfast. The driver hauled her single carpet bag, heavy with hopes that now felt childish, and dropped it in the mud. "That'll be all, ma'am." Lily stepped down, her fine-soled boots sinking instantly into the freezing slush. The wind hit her full on, stealing her breath and whipping her bonnet ribbons against her cheek like tiny lashes. She was confused. There was no one here to meet her. Her intended, Mr. Silas Croft, had written of a prosperous claim and a sturdy home. His letters, though brief, had been kind enough. He was an older man. He'd said, a widower. He sought a companion, a wife to bring light to his frontier life. He'd sent the stagecoach fare. Lily, fleeing the bruises and broken promises of a fiancé back home, had mistaken that fare for salvation. "I am looking for Mr. Silas Croft," she said, her voice sounding thin and small against the wind. The driver was already checking the horses. He grunted, jerking his head toward the largest building, the saloon, where tinny, broken-sounding piano music leaked out. "You won't find him." "Pardon?" He turned, his face raw and chapped. "Dead, ma'am. Been dead 3 days." The world tilted. The cold she'd held at bay rushed in, making her dizzy. "Dead? How?" "Saloon brawl," the driver said. Not unkindly, but with the flat finality of a man who states facts. "Took a bullet over a card game. Buried him yesterday. You'd best see the agent at the store. He's got the ledger." He climbed back onto his seat, not waiting for an answer. The whip cracked, and the stagecoach, her last link to any world she knew, lurched away, leaving her standing over her bag in the filthy, freezing mud. Humiliation burned hot in her chest, hotter than the cold. She was stranded, penniless, a mail-order bride delivered to a dead man. She could feel eyes on her, from the saloon's fogged windows, from the shadows of the alley between the store and the smithy. Men, watching. She grabbed her bag and stumbled toward the general store, the sign creaking on one hinge. Inside, it was dark and smelled of coffee, cured meat, and dust. A pot-bellied stove in the corner gave off a weak warmth. The man behind the counter, the agent, looked up from a newspaper. He was wiping his spectacles. He saw her, and his expression wasn't welcoming. It was burdened. "You'd be Miss Crawford," he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, I was told about Mr. Croft, that he's gone." "Yes, a fool's end." The agent sighed, pushing the ledger toward her. "I'm sorry for it, ma'am. Silas, he ordered you, paid and all, but he's gone." Lily stared at the book. There it was. Her name, Lily Crawford, 24, from Missouri. Below it, claimant Silas Croft, and scrawled next to it in fresh ink, claimant deceased. "What am I supposed to do?" she whispered, the fury and the fear making her throat tight. The agent looked uncomfortable. He looked past her, toward the door. "Well, that's the trouble, isn't it? You got funds for return passage?" "No, he sent what I had." "I see." The agent looked down, busying himself by stacking cans. "There's work at the saloon. Maddie's always looking for girls to serve and wash." Lily felt the implication like a slap. Serve. She had run 2,000 miles from a man who thought he owned her, only to land in a place where every man would... "No," she said, her voice shaking. "I won't." "Not much else, ma'am," the agent said, his pity hardening. "This is Blackthorn Ridge, a woman alone." The door opened, letting in a blast of icy air. The small bell above it didn't jingle. It gave a dull, dead clank. The agent stopped talking. The air in the room changed. Lily turned. He was tall, but that wasn't what silenced the room. It was the stillness. He stood in the doorway for a beat, letting the wind blow past him, his eyes scanning the store. He wore a worn canvas coat, dark trousers, and scuffed boots. His black hair was long, tied back with a simple leather thong. His face was hard angles, the skin weathered, the cheekbones high and sharp. His eyes were dark, sharp, and settled on her with an unnerving, assessing quiet. He was half Apache. Lily had seen men like him on the journey, always on the fringes, translators or trackers, never quite belonging to the white world or the native one. They were men of shadow, and they made settlers nervous. He nodded once to the agent, his gaze drifting to the open ledger on the counter. To her name. He knew. Of course he knew. This whole town knew. He was Nash 10 Crow. He lived in the hills, trapped horses, and kept to himself. The town tolerated him because he was useful and dangerous. In equal measure, he'd seen her name on the unclaimed ledger an hour ago. He looked at Lily. He didn't offer sympathy. He just looked. "Sir?" the agent said, his voice tight with a respect that was rooted in fear. "Can I help you?" Nash didn't look at the agent. His eyes stayed on Lily. He saw the tremble in her hands. He saw the fury in her eyes, warring with the sheer, cold panic. He saw the thin gloves and the city boots, and he saw a woman about to be swallowed whole. He stepped forward. The locals who had been idling by the stove shifted, moving away from him. "She comes with me," he said. His voice was low, rough from disuse, like stones grinding together. Lily bristled. "I do not..." The agent looked horrified. "Now, Nash, you can't... She's a white woman. She's not..." "She's alone," Nash stated. It was another fact. "The town will have her, or I will." It wasn't a kind offer. It was a cold calculation. Lily looked at the agent, who was now sweating despite the chill. She looked out the window at the saloon, where a face had just pressed against the glass, grinning. "You cannot be serious," Lily said, turning on Nash. "I will not be claimed by you." Nash. 10. Crow looked at her. For the first time, his expression flickered. It was something like bitter amusement. "I'm not claiming you, ma'am. I'm offering shelter. The winter's turning. You won't last one night here." He turned, picked up her carpet bag from where she'd dropped it by the door, and walked out. Lily stood frozen. The agent wouldn't meet her eyes. The men by the stove were silent, watching. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her more than the wind. What would happen the moment the sun went down? Maddie's saloon. Or worse. She was furious. She was humiliated. She was trapped. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and walked out of the store into the biting wind, following the half-Apache horseman who held her bag. His horse was a lean, tough-looking Mustang, tied to the rail. The locals stared. They stared with open, ugly disapproval. A white woman, a mail-order bride, leaving with the half-breed. Their gazes were heavy, branding her. She was ruined. In the space of 10 minutes, she had arrived and been ruined. Nash dropped her bag, then easily slung it over the horse's rump, tying it down. He didn't offer her a hand. He just waited. "I have no money to pay you," she said stiffly, her words snatched by the wind. "I didn't ask for any. Where are you taking me?" "My cabin. It's safe." "Safe," she scoffed, the sound bitter. "With you." He finally turned to face her fully. His eyes were dark, and they held no softness at all. Safer than here. He put his hands on his hips, waiting. He would not force her, but he would not wait long. Lily looked at the saloon. The door opened, and 2 miners stumbled out, laughing. One of them saw her. He pointed. "Looky there! Silas's package, and the breed's got his hands on it." That was it. The choice was made. With a choked sound of rage, Lily moved to the horse. She was clumsy in her long skirts, her hands numb. Nash watched her struggle for a moment, then stepped in. His hands were on her waist. They were strong, impersonal, and lifted her onto the horse's back as if she weighed nothing. He swung up behind her, settling into the saddle. She was rigid, her back pressed against his chest. She could feel the solid warmth of him, the hard lines of his body. It was terrifying. It was the only warmth she'd felt all day. He spurred the horse, and they moved through the main street. No one spoke. The entire town of Blackthorn Ridge just watched them go, their silent condemnation following her like a physical weight. The ride was brutal. Nash left the town and cut immediately up a steep, rocky trail that was barely a trail at all. The wind howled, a high, lonely sound that seemed to come from the sky and the earth at once. The snow wasn't falling in flakes. It was a horizontal, grainy assault. Lily shut her eyes, clinging to the pommel. She could feel his body shielding hers from the worst of the wind. He rode with an easy, unnerving stillness, a man who was part of the landscape, not fighting it. They rode for what felt like hours. The world shrank to the horse's breathing, the crunch of hooves on ice, and the howl of the wind. The high desert was beautiful, in a way that hurt to look at. Red rock formations, dusted with white, looked like the bones of sleeping giants. Crows wheeled in the gray sky, calling to each other. The isolation was absolute. There was nothing, no one, just this man, and her. When she thought she could not endure another minute, he finally reined the horse in. They were in a small, sheltered canyon, tucked between high walls of rock that cut the wind. And there, built into the side of the hill, was his cabin. It was small. It wasn't even a cabin. It was barely a shack. It was low-built of rough-hewn logs and packed earth, with a roof of sod. A thin curl of smoke came from a chimney made of rocks and mud. Nash slid off the horse and, without a word, reached up for her. She ignored his hands, sliding down herself, her legs buckled, numb and weak. She caught herself on the horse's flank, her pride stinging. He untied her bag and carried it to the door. He pushed the heavy plank door open and went inside, leaving her to follow. Lily hesitated. This was the moment. She could turn around, walk back into the blizzard, and freeze. It seemed, for a second, like a reasonable option. She looked at the cabin. It was an animal's den. She looked at the darkening, snow-filled sky. She took a breath and stepped over the threshold. The inside was one room, dark but warmer. A small fire smoldered in a stone hearth, filling the air with a sharp, clean scent of juniper smoke. It smelled of leather, too, and coffee, and something wild she couldn't name. It was sparse, a bedroll in one corner, a small, rough table, a few iron pans hanging from pegs, a single chair, and it was clean, shockingly clean. The floor was swept earth, but it was clean. Nash dropped her bag by the wall. He didn't look at her. He didn't tell her to sit. He moved immediately to the fire, adding wood from a dry stack, coaxing it to life. The flames leaped up, casting flickering, dancing shadows. Lily stood in the center of the room, feeling large and useless and utterly out of place. Her fine wool coat, which had seemed so fashionable in Missouri, was now just a wet, cold weight. She unwrapped her scarf, her fingers stiff. She looked at the tiny, dim space. She thought of the sturdy home Silas Croft had promised. This was an insult. This whole day was an insult. Her voice, when it came out, was sharp and brittle, the only weapon she had left. "This is the smallest I've seen." She meant the cabin. She meant his life. She meant him. Nash. 10 Crow didn't stop what he was doing. He settled a battered coffee pot over the new flames. He turned, retrieved a tin mug from a shelf, wiped it with a cloth, and set it on the table. He took down a strip of dried meat and a knife. He didn't respond. He didn't defend himself. He didn't even look at her. He just prepared food. He moved with an economy of motion, a quiet grace that was almost animal. He was surviving, and he was offering her the same. His silence unnerved her. Her insult, which she had hoped would sting him, had vanished into the thick, smoky air as if she'd never spoken. She resented her own vulnerability. She hated that she was here, dependent on this silent, savage man. She sank into the single chair, holding her frozen hands toward the fire, her fury settling into a cold, watchful resentment. As the fire grew, it lit his face. She watched him. She saw now that the scars she'd glimpsed on his hands were not just from work. They were old, pale marks. One, across his knuckles, looked like it had been made by a blade. He was working, slicing the jerky, when the collar of his shirt gaped, tucked inside, against the dark skin of his chest. She saw it, a glint of metal, a worn, silver locket on a leather cord. It was so out of place, a locket, a civilized, sentimental thing, hidden under the rough clothes of this rougher man. It was a secret. It was a wound, like hers. The sight of it didn't soften her. It angered her. It was proof that he had something to protect, something he kept hidden. It made her feel her own exposed, raw loneliness even more keenly. He caught her looking. His eyes met hers, just for a second, and he shifted, the locket vanishing. He handed her the mug of coffee. It was black, scalding, and bitter. She drank it. They ate the jerky in silence. The wind howled outside, a living thing, clawing at the small cabin. The world was gone. There was only this room, this fire, and this man. When the darkness was complete, the tension in the room grew thick as wool. It was a suffocating, intimate silence. Nash stood. He went to a small chest and pulled out a thick pile of furs, a heavy buffalo hide and 2 wolf pelts. He didn't offer them. He dropped them on the floor near the hearth, the warmest spot. "That's yours," he said. He then went to his own bedroll, in the coldest corner by the door, and picked up his rifle. He checked the load. Lily watched, her heart hammering. "What are you doing?" "Sleeping," he said. He laid his bedroll on the dirt floor, right against the door, blocking it. He sat, leaned his back against the rough wood, and laid the rifle across his lap. He was sleeping, on the floor, with his gun. He was locking them in, but he was also putting himself between her and the door. Was he protecting her from the world outside, or protecting himself from her, or her from him? It was all three. Lily lay down on the furs. They were heavy and smelled of smoke and pine. They were warmer than any blanket she'd ever known, but she couldn't sleep. The silence was too loud. The fire popped, the wind screamed, and across the small, dark room, the man sat, awake, his eyes open, watching the fire. She couldn't stand it. The quiet, the unspoken, Whatever this was, she was a woman who used words as armor, as knives. Silence was a void she had to fill. "You're not very talkative, are you?" she said, her voice sharp, trying to sound mocking. He didn't move. His profile was carved shadow in the firelight. She pushed. She was cold and scared, and she wanted to hurt something. "Back in Missouri, the men, they know how to talk to a lady. They have manners." She pulled the fur tighter. "But I suppose I'll have to get used to the quietness. Out here, the size of things." She put a sting on the word size. It was the same insult as before. A jab at his cabin, his life, his self. She wanted a reaction, anger, anything but this heavy, assessing silence. Nash 10 Crow was still for a long moment. The firelight played on his hard face. Then he turned his head and looked at her. A small, slow smirk touched one corner of his mouth. It wasn't kind. It wasn't cruel. It was knowing. It was the look of a man who had seen worse than her insults and survived. It was the look of a man who saw right through her. He stood up. Lily tensed, pulling the fur to her chin. He didn't walk toward her. He walked to the heavy plank door. The wind was rattling it in its frame. He looked back at her, that same faint, unnerving smirk on his lips. Then he turned, lifted the thick wooden bar from its brackets, and slid it into place across the door. The heavy thunk of the bar seating was loud, final. It locked out the world. It locked out the wind, the town, the men, the blizzard. And it locked them in, together. He went back to his bedroll, sat down, and picked up his rifle. Lily stared at the barred door. Her sarcasm died in her throat. The jab had failed. He hadn't flinched. He had simply closed the door. The tension in the room didn't break, but it shifted. It was no longer her, alone, facing him. It was them, together, facing the vast, howling dark. She saw, in the way he settled by the door, a loneliness as deep and as cold as her own. And for the first time since she'd stepped off the stagecoach, the shivering in her bones wasn't just from the cold. She turned her back to him, facing the fire, and listened to the silence of two broken people, trapped in the smallest, safest room in the world. The snow did not stop. It fell for 3 days, then 4. The world beyond the single window of the cabin vanished, replaced by a suffocating, swirling white. The silence inside was almost as heavy. It was broken only by the crackle of the fire, the howl of the wind as it scraped against the rock, and the small, necessary sounds of survival. They fell into a rhythm born of that necessity. Each morning, Nash would rise before the light, his movements economical, quiet. He would tend the fire, then pull on his heavy coat and go out, vanishing into the gray dawn with his rifle. Lily, waking on her bed of furs, would feel a small, sharp jolt of panic that he had left her, followed by a wave of shame when she heard the steady, rhythmic thunk of his axe biting into the woodpile he kept sheltered under a rock overhang. He was not leaving. He was simply getting the wood. While he was out, she would do her part. She learned to bank the fire, to melt snow for water, to grind the last of the coffee beans. She learned to make a thin, passable stew from the jerky and the few dried vegetables he had. Food was rationed. They ate twice a day, a piece of dried meat, a cup of broth. Hunger became a dull, constant companion, sharpening her senses, making her weak and irritable. When Nash returned, his shoulders white with snow, he would nod to her, a bare acknowledgement, and set about his own tasks. He checked the traps he'd set, sometimes returning with a rabbit, which felt like a feast. He spent hours oiling his rifle, mending his tack, his scarred hands moving with a fluid, practiced grace. They worked, they ate, they survived. They did not talk. The silence was a barrier he built, and one she was too proud or too frightened to breach. Instead, Her mind filled the quiet. It went back. It always went back to Missouri. She was chopping wood. It was her job now, splitting the smaller logs he brought in. The axe was heavy. Her grip was clumsy, and her arms ached. A piece of wood split wrong, flying back and striking her shin. She cried out, a sharp gasp of pain, and dropped the axe. She leaned against the cabin wall, breathing hard, the pain a bright, hot flare. And just like that, she was not in Arizona. She was in the parlor back home, the air thick with the smell of sweet bourbon and cigar smoke. His name was Arthur Pendleton. He was handsome, in the way a prized bull is handsome. All broad shoulders, thick neck, and a satisfied, proprietary air. He smelled of bay rum and money he hadn't earned. He was standing over her. She'd spilled a drink on his ledger. He hadn't yelled. He never yelled. Not at first. He'd simply looked at her, his eyes flat, and he'd backhanded her. The force of it had sent her sprawling onto the hearth, scattering the fire irons with a terrible clatter. She remembered the shock of it, the coppery taste of blood in her mouth, and his voice. Not angry, just disappointed. Lily, you must learn to be more careful. A man's ledger is his life. He had been her fiancé, her father, blinded by Arthur's supposed family name and easy charm, had called it a brilliant match. Lily had called it a cage. The beatings had started small, a grip on her wrist that was too tight, a shove against a doorframe, then the open hand. He'd apologized afterward, brought her silk ribbons, kissed her bruises with a mouth that tasted of whiskey, and sworn it was only because he loved her so fiercely. The memory that truly chilled her came days later. She'd been hiding in the study, pressing a cold cloth to her split lip, when she heard him talking to another man in the hall, a man with a gravelly voice, a man Arthur owed. "She's a fine-looking thing. Pendleton," the gravelly voice said, spirited. "I'll take her." "She's my intended," Arthur had replied, but his voice was weak, bargaining. "And you've wagered her and lost. I have the writ. She's collateral. She's mine. Or you pay me double by Saturday." Collateral. She wasn't a person. She was a horse. She was a stack of chips. She was a thing to be sold to cover a gambling debt. That night, she had packed a small bag, taken her mother's last $20, and walked to the train station. She'd seen the advertisement for mail-order brides in a discarded newspaper. It wasn't a search for love. It was an escape hatch. She had picked the most remote name on the list. Silas Croft, Blackthorn Ridge, a place so far, so desolate. She'd thought even Arthur's reach couldn't touch her. She rubbed her shin, the wood smoke of Nash's cabin stinging her eyes. She was still running. She picked up the axe. She hated being weak. She hated this cold and this hunger, and she hated the silent man who watched her. She tried to reclaim some part of herself, some power. The only tool she had ever known to work on men was her tongue, either sharp or sweet. "You must have been very lonely up here," she said one evening, forcing a lightness into her voice. She was mending her skirt, her fingers clumsy. "Before I arrived to brighten the place, I can't imagine a man like you has much company." Nash was sharpening his skinning knife. The blade made a soft, rhythmic shing-shing sound against the stone. He didn't look up. "I don't seek it." "No, I suppose not." She pressed on, annoyed. "It's hard to entertain in a home of this size. You'd barely have room for a guest." She smiled. A brittle, flirtatious thing. Unless they were very, very close. He stopped sharpening. He set the knife down. He looked at her. His eyes were not cold. They were just clear. He wasn't looking at her mouth or her hair. He was looking at her. He saw the tremor in her hands. He saw the desperation behind the smile. He saw the pain. "Your gloves are torn," he said, his voice flat. Her smile faltered. "Yes, the wood." He held out his hand. "Give them to me." wary. She handed him the cheap wool gloves. He turned them over, examining the frayed seams, the hole in the palm. He said nothing. He just picked up a needle and some sinew thread and began to sew. His stitches were small, tight, and incredibly precise. She watched him, her attempt at flirtation turning to ash in her mouth. He wasn't a man to be charmed or manipulated. He was something else. He was a man who saw a problem, a hole, a cold hand, and fixed it. The small kindnesses were more disarming than any threat. She woke one morning, stiff from the cold, and went to pull on her boots. They were usually damp, frozen stiff, but they weren't. They were by the fire. They were dry. And they were soft. He had rubbed them with oil. She slid her feet in, and they were still faintly warm. She looked over at him. He was by the window, watching the snow, his back to her. He hadn't done it for thanks. He had just done it. Another day, she saw him take something from his pack, a small, precious bundle wrapped in oilcloth. He unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a single, shriveled, dried peach, a luxury from a world away. He held it out to her. "No," she said, her voice sharp. "That's yours. It's your stash." "Eat," he said. "I don't want your charity, Mr. Ten Crow." He looked at her, his patience wearing thin. "It's not charity, it's food. You're weak. Eat." He pushed it into her hand. Her fingers closed around the dry, tacky fruit. It was the first sweet thing she had tasted in months. She put it in her mouth, and the sudden, intense rush of sugar and sunshine made her eyes sting. She had to turn away, ashamed of the tears that threatened to fall over a piece of fruit. She wanted to know about him. She looked at his scarred hands, at the silver locket he never took off, but she was afraid to ask. His past came to him not in words, but in flashes. He was mending a trap, the metal cold against his skin, the cold. It reminded him. He was 8 years old. He was hiding in the creek bed, the mud and frozen reeds biting into his skin. He was watching his home. It wasn't a cabin. It was a good house, a white man's house. His mother, Sarah, was a white woman, a preacher's daughter who had run away with his father, a Chiricahua warrior. The mob was made of settlers, men he knew, men who had traded with his mother. They were holding torches. They were calling his mother a traitor to her race. They dragged her out, her white nightgown, her blonde hair, unbound. He remembered her face. She wasn't screaming. She was proud, defiant. He remembered the rope. He remembered the sound of the wagon pulling away. He remembered her feet, dangling, turning slowly in the torchlight. He squeezed the trap, his knuckles white. Another flash. He was older, 12. He was with his father, 10 Crow. They were being hunted, not by settlers, by soldiers, blue coats. They were cornered in a box canyon. The gunfire echoed, loud as thunder. His father pushed him behind a rock. "Do not move. Do not make a sound. Be the stone. Shy." He was the stone. He watched for hours. He watched the soldiers find his father, watched them. He closed his eyes. The locket under his shirt felt hot, searing. It had been his mother's. He was forced to ride. He was Apache, so the soldiers used him as a tracker. He was white, so the Apache distrusted him. He'd ridden on raids with both. He'd seen villages burn, white and native. He'd seen blood spilled that didn't deserve spilling. He had fought for survival, belonging to no one, hated by everyone. He had learned one thing: silence was survival. Talk was a white man's game, a game of lies. Lily saw the look on his face, the darkness, the way his hand tightened on the trap. "What is it?" she whispered. He blinked, the memories receding. He looked at her. "Nothing. The wind." That night, the wind was a monster. It shrieked and clawed at the cabin. The small structure groaned. The fire seemed to cower. Lily couldn't sleep. She sat up, pulling the buffalo hide around her. The cabin felt too small. The world felt too large and too angry. She thought of Arthur. She thought of the men in the saloon. She thought of the cold. She felt utterly, completely alone. A sob escaped her. It was quiet, but in the small cabin, it was as loud as a gunshot. She clapped a hand over her mouth, horrified. Nash, sitting by the door, his rifle across his knees, turned his head. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the tears coming hot and fast now. "I'm sorry. It's just... She couldn't stop them. It was all of it. The dead fiancé, the humiliation, the cold, the fear. It was Arthur's hand. It was the loneliness. "I've never felt safe," she choked out, the words ripped from her. "Not with Arthur, not with my father, not with any man, ever. I don't know what it feels like. To not be scared." She curled into a ball, weeping, her shoulders shaking. Nash was still for a long time. He watched her. She expected him to tell her to be quiet. She expected him to ignore her. She expected him to move toward her, and a new, sharper fear spiked in her. He did none of those things. He stood up. He walked not to her, but to the peg where his heavy winter coat hung. It was thick sheepskin, worn and heavy, the one he wore into the heart of the blizzards. He walked to her. She flinched, pulling back. He stopped. He didn't say, "It's all right." He didn't say, "Don't cry." He didn't touch her. He just laid the coat over her shoulders. It was impossibly heavy and warm. It smelled of pine smoke and leather and him. The weight of it was a physical comfort. It was an anchor. It was like a wall being built around her. He went back to his post by the door. Lily wept into the collar of his coat, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of the man who was in the room with her. After that night, the silence changed. It was no longer a heavy, angry thing. It was companionable. They began to talk, small things. "This is good rabbit," she said one night. "The snare was set right," he replied. "My mother," Lily said, staring into the fire. "She grew tomatoes. Back in Missouri, they were so red. I've never seen anything like them since." Nash was quiet for a moment. "My father. He knew how to find water where there was none. He'd listen to the stone. It was an exchange. A small, precious piece of her, for a small, precious piece of him." One day, when the snow had stopped and a weak, watery sun appeared, he took her outside. He pushed his rifle into her hands. "What's this for?" "You're weak," he said. "You're slow. You can't chop wood well, but you can learn this. You need to learn this." "I don't like guns." "It doesn't matter what you like. It matters what keeps you alive. Hold it." He taught her. He was a harsh, patient teacher. He showed her how to brace it against her shoulder. "Tuck it in, tight, or it will break your bone." He showed her how to sight. "Breathe out, squeeze, don't pull." His hands were on hers, correcting her grip. They were rough, scarred, but gentle. The contact was impersonal, focused only on the task, but it made her skin burn. She fired. The blast was deafening. The recoil slammed into her shoulder, sending her stumbling back. She missed the pine cone he'd set on a rock by a yard. She was furious, her shoulder screaming. And Nash laughed. It wasn't a smirk. It was a real laugh, a low, rough sound from deep in his chest. It startled her more than the gunshot. "Again," he said, the ghost of the laugh still in his eyes. She shot again, and again. By the end of the afternoon, she could hit the rock. The fragile piece was shattered 3 days later. Lily was outside, gathering firewood, when she heard them. Horses, not one, several. She ran inside, her heart pounding. "Nash, riders!" He was at the door in an instant, rifle in hand. He looked out, his face hardening into a mask of stone. "Get inside. Stay away from the window." "Who is it?" Trouble. 4 men. White men. They rode out of the trees, their horses churning the snow. They were not miners. They were dressed hard, with guns on their hips and a mean, confident air. They stopped 20 yards from the cabin. Their leader, a big man with a thick beard and cruel, pale eyes, spat into the snow. Nash stepped outside. He stood on the packed earth in front of his door. He held his rifle loosely, at his side. "That's far enough," Nash said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the cold air. The leader looked at Nash, and then his eyes slid to the cabin, where Lily was peering through a crack in the wall. "We ain't here for you, breed," the man said. "We're here for the girl. Arthur Pendleton sent us. She's his property." Lily's blood ran cold. Arthur, he'd found her. He'd sent men. "She's not property," Nash said, "and she's not leaving. Ride on." The man laughed, a short, ugly bark. "You think you can stop us? 4 guns to 1. We're taking her, and we'll enjoy the trouble. Maybe we'll take your scalp while we're at it." The men spread out, fanning into a half circle. "Nash," Lily breathed from the doorway, terrified. Nash didn't move. He didn't raise his rifle. He just watched the leader, his eyes flat and dead. "The first man who raises his gun, I'll kill him. The second man, I'll kill him. 2, the third, maybe he gets me, but the first 2 are dead. Are you the first or the third?" The air was still. The men looked at each other. They'd heard of Nash 10 Crow. They'd heard he was fast and that he was half Apache, which, in their minds, made him half animal, half demon. They saw the stillness in him now, and they believed it. The leader's confidence wavered. He hadn't come for a bloodbath. He'd come to retrieve a runaway woman from a half-breed. "She's worth a lot of money," the leader tried, bargaining. "She's not for sale," Nash said. The leader stared at him for a long, hard second. He looked at Nash's rifle, at the cabin, at the rocks above. He didn't know if Nash was alone. He didn't know what traps might be set. He cursed a long, filthy string of words. "This ain't over. We'll be back when it thaws, and we'll bring more men. We'll burn this hovel to the ground with both of you in it." He yanked his horse's head around. "Let's go." They rode away, their backs rigid with anger. Lily sagged against the doorframe, her legs shaking so badly she could barely stand. Nash watched them until they were gone. He stepped back inside, his face grim. He barred the door, the heavy thunk of the wood sounding louder than before. The threat was no longer an abstract thing. It was real. It had a face, and it had her name. Lily looked at Nash. He was cleaning his rifle, his hands moving with the same steady, focused calm. He had faced 4 men. He had faced them for her. He hadn't asked her for anything. He hadn't bargained. He had simply stood. He was the only man who had ever stood between her and harm. She had nowhere else to go. She was safer here, in this tiny cabin, with this dangerous, silent man, than she had ever been in her life. The thought did not bring her comfort. It terrified her. Trusting him, needing him, felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. It was a fall she wasn't sure she could survive. The men from Missouri did not return, but the storm did. It came back with a vengeance, not as a squall, but as a siege. The wind, which had howled, now screamed. It was a high, thin, maddening sound that scraped the nerves raw. The snow, which had swirled, now fell in a solid, blinding curtain, a vertical river of white that buried the canyon. For 2 days, they were prisoners. The world shrank to the 4 walls of the cabin. The routines of survival were suspended. There was no wood to chop. The pile was buried. There was no hunting. The world was white and dead. They were forced into a proximity that was almost unbearable. The cabin, which had once seemed small, now felt like a coffin. The air grew thick, heavy with the smell of juniper smoke. boiled coffee, and the simple, animal scent of two people trapped. They rationed the food. A few strips of jerky, a small cup of broth. The hunger gnawed at them, making the silence heavier, the tension a palpable thing. Lily could hear him breathe. She could see the pulse in his throat. She watched him. He sat by the fire, mending a piece of tack, his hands sure and steady. The firelight played over him, casting his face in planes of shadow and burnished light. He had taken off his damp outer shirt, working in the thin cotton undershirt. It was unbuttoned at the neck, and in the heat from the hearth, he had rolled up his sleeves. She saw the scars clearly, the pale, puckered mark on his forearm, the network of older, silvery lines across his knuckles, and the locket. It rested against his skin, a small, secret weight. The silence stretched, pulled thin by the screaming wind. It had to break. Lily moved from her furs. She knelt by the fire, pretending to warm her hands. She was 2 feet from him. He did not look up, but his hand stilled on the leather. He knew. Her own hand was trembling. She was not the woman who had arrived in Blackthorn Ridge. She was not the woman who had fled Missouri. She was someone new, someone forged in this cold, quiet place. She reached out. Her fingers, chapped and rough, brushed the scar on his forearm. It was a small, hesitant touch. Nash flinched as if she had laid a hot coal on his skin. He did not pull away, but his whole body went rigid. His head came up, and his eyes met hers. They were dark, bottomless, and filled with a warning. He put his hand over hers, gently but with a strength that stopped her. He lifted her hand from his arm. His voice was low, rough as gravel. "Don't touch what you don't mean to hold on to." It was not a rejection. It was a statement, a boundary line drawn in the dirt. He was telling her he was not a game. He was not a comfort to be taken lightly. He was a wound, and to touch him was to own a piece of that pain. Her heart hammered. The brittle, teasing Lily of old would have retreated. Her pride stung. But this Lily was too cold, too hungry, and too honest. She did not pull her hand away from his grasp. She let him hold it. "I'm not trying to hold on to it," she whispered, her voice shaking but clear. "I want—" She swallowed, the words thick in her throat. "I want you to touch me." His grip tightened, just slightly. His eyes searched her face. "Not," she rushed on, the truth spilling out, raw and painful. "Not because you feel pity, not like the coat." She looked at the heavy sheepskin he had laid over her, now folded on her furs. "Not because I'm some broken thing you have to save." She looked at their hands, his dark and scarred, hers pale and trembling. "I want to feel something good, for once, just once in my life. I want to feel something that isn't cold or afraid. I want to feel human." He said nothing. The wind shrieked, as if trying to tear the words from the air. He let go of her hand. She thought he would turn away. She thought he would retreat back to his wall of silence, and the shame of her confession burned in her cheeks. But he didn't. He set the tack aside, his movement slow, deliberate. He turned to face her fully, kneeling on the packed earth floor. The firelight was between them. He looked at her for a long time. He looked at her chapped lips, and the fear in her eyes, and the defiant set of her jaw. He saw her, not the mail-order bride, not the white woman, just Lily. He raised his hands. They were the hands that had set traps, killed men, and sewn her gloves. They were rough. When they touched her face, she gasped. His touch was not a caress. It was a holding. He cupped her jaw, his thumbs resting on her cheekbones, as if she were something precious, something sacred. He held her face as if he were memorizing it, as if he were seeing a person for the first time in a very, very long time. He leaned in. The kiss was not what she expected. It was not the clumsy, wet, possessive kisses of Arthur Pendleton. It was not a kiss of passion or of fire. It was a kiss of profound, aching loneliness. It was hesitant. His lips were dry, chapped like hers. It was just a press, a question. She leaned into it, a small, broken sound in her throat. Her eyes closed. His hand slid from her jaw to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in the messy hair at her nape. He pulled her closer, and the kiss deepened. It was slow. It was a discovery. It tasted of coffee and smoke and the faintest hint of salt. It was a promise of warmth in a world of ice. She felt a trembling start deep inside her, a thaw. Her hands came up, grabbing his shirt, holding on as if she were drowning. This was what she wanted. This was the good thing. The kiss became desperate. It was the hunger, the cold, the fear, the isolation, all pouring into this one single point of contact. His other arm came around her, pulling her against his chest. She could feel the hard, steady beat of his heart against hers. He was warm. He was so warm. He broke the kiss, resting his forehead against hers. They were both breathing hard, the air misting between them. She was ready. She would have given him anything in that moment, just to stay this close, just to keep the cold away. He kissed her again, on the temple, on the cheekbone. His lips were gentle, and then he stopped. He pulled back. His hands were on her shoulders, holding her steady, but creating distance. "Nash?" she whispered, confused. It was rejection. She felt the cold rush back in. "Lily." He rarely used her name. The sound of it was a shock. "Not like this." "I don't understand," she said, her voice small. "I know what you want." His voice was rougher now, strained. He was fighting himself. This is a cage." He looked around the tiny, dark cabin, at the snow piling up against the window. "This storm, this room, you're trapped. You have no choice." She looked at him, uncomprehending. "I won't be another trap," he said, his voice flat, final. "I won't be another man who takes something from you when you have nowhere else to turn. When this snow melts, when you can ride away. If you still—" He didn't finish. He was giving her back the one thing Arthur had stolen, the one thing she had almost thrown away. Her choice. He released her. He stood up, picked up his rifle, and went back to his post by the door. He sat, his back to her. Lily stared at him. The desire was still thrumming in her, a painful, unfinished ache. But underneath it was something else, a profound, bone-deep wave of relief, of safety. He had wanted her. She had seen it in his eyes, and he had stopped. She lay down in her furs, wrapping the heavy sheepskin coat around her. She turned her back to him, but this time, it was not a rejection. She closed her eyes, and for the first time since she had left Missouri, she slept deeply. The storm broke 2 days later. The world outside was a miracle, a pristine, white expanse under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The silence was absolute, as if the world had been scrubbed clean. Nash went out, his rifle on his shoulder. He was gone for hours. Lily stayed near the cabin, her body weak, her mind strangely calm. She dug out the woodpile, her movements automatic. She heard him before she saw him. He was not walking. He was leading his horse, and behind his horse, tied by a rope, was another. It was a wild thing, a Mustang, mare, dun-colored with a dark stripe down her back. She was skin and bones, shivering, and one of her back legs was bleeding. A long, dark gash on the hock. She was favoring it, stumbling in the deep snow. "What?" Lily began. Found her in a drift. Nash said. He was all business, his voice flat. The night of the storm, locked away. Caught in the rocks, coyote-bitten, I think, or just the stone. She's weak. He led the 2 horses to the small, 3-sided lean-to that served as his stable. His own horse nudged the mare, as if in comfort. She'll die out here, Lily said. Probably, Nash agreed. He got a bucket. But not today. He began to melt snow, to boil water. He brought out a small leather pouch of herbs. Let me help, Lily said. He glanced at her. She's wild. She'll kick. So will I, if I'm cornered. Lily said, I know horses. My father, we had a farm, before. He looked at her for a moment, then nodded. He handed her a clean cloth. They worked together. It was a new rhythm. He gentled the horse, his voice low and murmuring, a mix of English and Apache words she did not understand. But the horse seemed to. He held the mare's head, stroking her neck, while Lily, her hands shaking at first, began to clean the wound. It was bad, deep and ragged, but the cold had kept it clean. She washed it with the warm, herb-laced water. The mare trembled, but pinned by Nash's calm and his strength. She stood. Lily tore strips from one of her own petticoats to make a bandage. As she wrapped the leg, her hand brushed his. They both froze. It was just skin on skin, but it was everything. They finished. The mare was bandaged, and Nash had forked some of his own horse's precious hay for her. She'll live, Lily said, standing back. Maybe, Nash said. They stood side by side, watching the wounded animal. A shared act of healing. The air between them was no longer charged with desperate, hungry tension. It was quiet. It was soft. The sound of a man's voice, loud, drunk, and angry, shattered the peace. "10 Crow, you snake-eating bastard! Get out here!" Lily's heart leaped into her throat. It wasn't Arthur's men. This was a local voice. Nash moved, pushing her behind him toward the cabin door. Stay inside. A man stumbled up the path. He was a miner Lily had seen in town. A big, red-faced man named Jed Hicks. He was drunk, waving a bottle in one hand and a rifle in the other. "I seen you," he roared. "Coming back with that horse. Thought I'd pay a visit. Town says you got that white woman holed up in there." Nash stood in front of his cabin, his arms crossed. He looked bored. "Go home. Jed, you're drunk." "I am drunk," Jed agreed, laughing. "But I ain't blind. You can't keep her. She's one of us. She ain't for your kind." He spat on the snow. "Send her out. We'll take care of her in town. Maddie's needs a girl." "She's not going anywhere," Nash said, his voice deadly quiet. "Oh?" Jed raised his rifle, clumsy with the whiskey. "You and whose army? You animal. I'm here to rescue her." He leveled the gun at Nash's chest. Nash moved. He was not a man. He was a shadow. He moved faster than Lily could follow. He was not trying to brawl. He was trying to end it. He brushed the rifle barrel aside, the gun going off with a deafening crack into the snow. In the same motion, his fist connected with Jed's jaw. It was a single, clean, brutal sound, the sound of bone meeting bone. Jed Hicks crumpled. He fell like a sack of grain, his bottle shattering, his rifle flying into a snowbank. He was out cold. Lily stared, her hand over her mouth. Nash stood over the man, breathing hard, his face a mask of cold fury. He looked at the unconscious miner, then at Lily. He was disgusted. He bent, retrieved the rifle, and unloaded it. Jed stirred, groaning. He rolled over, spitting blood and snow. He looked up at Nash, and his drunken rage was replaced by a cold, sober terror. He scrambled backward. You hit me," Jed sputtered, holding his jaw. He looked at Lily, who was standing in the doorway, her face pale. You're with him? You let him? God almighty, you're filth! You're both filth!" He got to his feet, grabbing his empty rifle. "This ain't over. The town won't stand for this. A white woman. Laying with... No, we're coming. A posse. We'll burn this den to the ground. We'll clear this ridge." He turned and fled, stumbling and sliding down the icy path. The silence that fell was worse than the storm. The threat was no longer distant. It was here. It was the town. It was his kind against her kind. Nash turned. He looked at Lily. His face was grim, shut down. The softness of the morning, the intimacy of the night, was gone. He looked at the wounded mare, who was watching them with wide, frightened eyes. "That horse," he said, his voice flat. "She's weak, but she can walk, and she can carry you. You need to pack your things. You'll head south, follow the canyon wall. You'll hit the stage road to Prescott in 2 days." He was sending her away. Lily looked at him, at this man who had faced down hired guns, a drunk miner, and now an entire town. For her, this man who had held her face in his hands like she was sacred. This man who was, once again, standing between her and the world, preparing to face it alone. She felt a surge of anger so pure, so hot, it burned away the last of her fear. "No," she said. He turned, surprised. "Lily, you don't understand. This isn't one drunk. This is the town. They'll come, with ropes and torches." "And you?" she asked, her voice sharp. "What will you do? Stay here and let them—" "This is my land," he said, as if that explained everything. "I don't run." "Neither do I," she said, stepping out of the cabin to stand beside him. "Not anymore." She faced him, her eyes blazing. "You are the first man, the only man, who never took something from me." She saw his face flicker, the memory of the night before in his eyes. "You gave me food," she said, her voice shaking. "You gave me your coat. You gave me a choice. In the dark, when I had none. You don't dare take yourself away now. You don't dare." He stared at her. He saw the terror, but he also saw the steel. He saw the woman she had become. He saw a partner. He was quiet for a long time. Then he gave a single, sharp nod. "All right," he said. He turned and walked back into the cabin. The time for talk was over. "Bring in the water bucket," he called. "Fill every pot. They'll try fire." Lily didn't hesitate. She grabbed the bucket. They worked. They didn't speak. He pulled the heavy wooden shutters, built for blizzards, not bullets, across the 2 small windows, plunging the cabin into a dim, fire-lit twilight. She melted snow, filling every container, lining them up by the door. He handed her the skinning knife and a whetstone. "Sharpen this," and the axe. She sat, her hands shaking, and began to draw the blade across the stone. Shing, shing, shing! He took his rifle apart, cleaning and oiling it with a speed that was mesmerizing. He loaded it. He loaded the pistol he kept in his pack. He loaded Jed's rifle. He handed her Jed's rifle. "You know how to use this." I hit the rock," she said, her voice small. "They are bigger than a rock," he said, not unkindly. He placed her by the wall, near the small crack in the shutter. "You stay here. You stay low. Do not shoot until I do. Do not shoot at the sky. You shoot to hit." She nodded, her face pale but her eyes set. "I understand." They finished. The cabin was a fortress. The water was ready. The blades were sharp. The guns were loaded. They sat in the dim, quiet cabin. The only sound was the fire and the soft breathing of the wounded horse in the lean-to outside. They waited for the posse. They waited. The silence was a stretched animal hide, drying in the sun. It was brittle, tight, and promised to snap. Lily sat with her back against the rough log wall, Jed's rifle heavy across her lap. Her hands were sweating, but her body was cold. She could feel the pulse in her throat, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Nash was by the door, a shadow in the fire-lit gloom. He was perfectly still. He was not waiting. She realized. He was listening. He was part of the wind, part of the stone. He was listening to the canyon. Lily was listening to the beat of her own heart. It came, as she knew it would. Not as a shout, but as a vibration. The muffled thud, thud, thud of many horses. Slowed to a walk by the deep snow and the incline, they were not trying to be quiet. They were announcing themselves. This was not an ambush. It was an execution. Nash looked at her. His eyes, in the dimness, were just dark pools. He gave a single nod. Stay low, stay ready. He unbarred the door. The heavy wood scraped open, letting in a rectangle of blinding, snow-bright light. It was late afternoon. The light was blue and cold. Nash stepped into it. He stood on the small patch of packed earth in front of his door, his own rifle held loosely in one hand, pointed at the ground. Lily scrambled from the wall, crawling on her hands and knees to the crack in the shutter. Her heart felt like it would tear itself from her chest. They were here. It was not 4 men, it was 12, maybe more. Jed Hicks was there, his face swollen and purple, a satisfied, hateful sneer on his lips. But he was not the leader. The man at the front was tall, broad, and wore a thick buffalo coat. His name was Elias Thorne, and he owned the saloon. He was the unofficial law in Blackthorn Ridge, a man whose power came from the gold he bought and the whiskey he sold. They sat on their horses, a grim jury, fanned out in a half-circle just beyond rifle range. They looked at the cabin, and they looked at Nash. "Well, 10 Crow." Thorne's voice boomed, the sound deadened by the snow. "You've caused a stir. Seems you've taken something that don't belong to you." "She's not a thing," Nash said. His voice was not loud, but it carried in the cold, clear air, and she belongs to herself. Jed Hicks spat. "Listen to it talk, like a real man!" Thorne raised a gloved hand, silencing him. "The woman, Nash. We've come for the woman. Send her out. Jed says you've had your way with her, that you've turned her." "She is not turned," Nash said. "She is sheltered. She is free to go." "Then let her go," Thorne shouted. "This was it." Lily tensed. "Let her go," Nash repeated. "And you let her pass. You give her a horse, provisions. You let her ride to Prescott, unharmed." Thorne laughed, a deep, cold, cruel sound. "Oh, we'll let her go. She'll go to Maddie's, where she belongs. She's soiled goods now, ain't she? After layin' with your kind. She'll be lucky we let her serve." "Then you will not have her," Nash said. "That's not your choice, animal." Thorne sneered. The word hung in the air, ugly and sharp. "We'll drag her out, and we'll stretch your neck from your own roof beam." For the insult. Nash stood, unmoving. He looked at Thorne. He looked at Jed. He looked at the faces of the men, miners, trappers, teamsters, men who had traded with him, men who had feared him. Now they were a single, hateful wall. He let his rifle drop into the snow. Lily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "What is he doing?" Nash raised his empty hands, palms out. "You want me, not her." Thorne's horse shifted, uneasy. "What is this?" "Take me," Nash said. His voice was flat. "Hang me, shoot me. Whatever you came for, do it. But you let her ride away. You give me your word. You let her go." Lily's eyes filled with hot, furious tears. He was offering himself. He was trading his life, the one thing he had fought so hard to keep, for hers. A silence fell over the posse. The men looked at each other, confused. This was not the fight they had come for. Jed Hicks broke it, his voice a whine. "It's a trick. He's a savage. I tell you, he's trying to trick us." Thorne looked at Nash. His eyes narrowed. He looked at the cabin, then back at the man standing defenseless in the snow. A slow, ugly smile spread across his face. He began to laugh. "Hear that, boys," he roared to the others. "The brute wants to make a bargain. It thinks it has a soul to trade. It thinks it's human. The other men laughed with him, a wave of cruel, barking laughter that echoed off the canyon walls. "You're an animal. 10 crow," Thorne said, his voice dripping with false pity. "Animals don't make bargains. They get put down, and we're taking the woman, too, as payment for the trouble." He unholstered his pistol. "But we'll take you first." Lily saw it. She saw the satisfaction in Thorne's eyes. She saw the resignation in Nash's stance. He had known they would refuse. He had done it just to what? To prove it to her? No. Her fury was a physical thing. It burned away her tears. It burned away her fear. She rose from her knees. She rammed the butt of Jed's rifle against her shoulder, just as Nash had taught her. She didn't aim at a pine cone. She aimed at the sky, high above their heads, but close enough. She squeezed the trigger. The crack of the shot was deafening, a sharp counterpoint to the men's laughter. The bullet screamed over their heads, a high, vicious whine. The laughter died instantly. The men's horses reared, snorting in panic. The men cursed, fighting for control, their hands flying to their own weapons. "What in the hell?" Thorne roared, his eyes wide, scanning the rocks above. "Up here, you monsters!" Lily's voice, shrill, shaking, but strong. She shoved the shutter open with the barrel of the rifle, letting the cold light flood her face. She was standing in the window, her hair wild, her face pale and streaked with soot. She's got a gun," one of the men yelled. "Leave him alone," Lily screamed. "He didn't take me. I came with him. He's a better man than all of you put together." Thorne stared, his face turning a dark, mottled red. The woman, the prize, the victim, was holding a rifle. She had chosen the half-breed. It was the ultimate insult. You, he stammered, his rage making him incoherent. "You're with him? By choice?" "Yes," she shrieked. "By choice. Now get off his land." "Fine," Thorne roared, his face a mask of pure hate. "Fine. If you want to die with an animal, you'll die with an animal. Burn it. Burn them both." He raised his pistol, not at Nash, but at her, at the window. "Lily, no!" Nash dove. He was not moving toward the men. He was moving toward her. He launched himself from the doorway, back toward the cabin. Thorne fired. The sound of the shot was flat. It was simultaneous with Nash's body hitting hers. He slammed into her, a solid, heavy weight, knocking her from the window back into the darkness of the cabin. She fell hard, the rifle clattering to the floor. He landed on top of her, his body shielding hers. For a second, there was only the ringing in her ears, the smell of gunpowder, and his weight. Then the world exploded. A volley of gunfire erupted from the posse. Bullets ripped through the open window, thudding into the back wall. Wood splintered. One of the water pots exploded, sending water and clay shards flying. "Nash!" Lily screamed, pushing at him. "Get off! They're shooting!" He didn't move. "Nash!" He grunted, a low, pained sound. He rolled off her, slumping against the wall. And she saw it. The dark, wet stain spreading across his side, high on his ribs. The front of his shirt was already soaked. "Oh, God," she breathed. "Oh, sweet God, no." He had taken the bullet meant for her, Thorne's bullet. The posse was shouting, reloading. Another volley tore through the window. "The door!" Nash gasped, his face pale, beaded with sweat. "Bar the door!" Terror gave her strength. She scrambled to the door, slammed the heavy plank shut, and dropped the bar into place. The thunk was followed by the thud, thud, thud of bullets hitting the wood. They were trapped. She ran back to him. He was trying to sit up, his rifle still in his hand. "You're hit," she said, her voice a stupid, high-pitched whisper. "It's nothing," he grunted, but his face was ashen. "The window, the shutter." "To hell with the shutter!" she screamed. She grabbed his shirt, ripping it open. It was bad. It was high on his left side, just under the arm. It was bleeding. A lot. Dark, pumping blood. "The water," she said, her mind racing. "The cloths, my petticoat." She ran to the bucket, grabbed the cloths they had prepared. She ran back, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold them. "You have to," he gasped, trying to aim his rifle at the door. "You have to shoot." "I have to stop this," she cried. She pressed the cloth against the wound, hard. He roared, a low animal sound of pure agony, and arched his back. I'm sorry," she wept. "I have to just hold on." Outside, the men were shouting. "There, hold up! Get the lamp oil! We'll burn 'em out, like he said." "Fire!" Lily pressed down, the cloth soaking through in her hands, the warm, metallic smell of his blood filling her senses. She was terrified. This was a terror beyond anything Arthur had ever made her feel. This was the terror of loss. "I can't," she whispered, rocking back on her heels. The tears were blinding her. I can't do this. Lily!" His voice was weak, but sharp. It cut through her panic. "Get more cloth! Press!" She did. She moved, her hands automatic. She ripped another strip from her skirt. She packed it against the wound. "It's not stopping," she sobbed. "Nash, it's not stopping. Oh, God, I'm going to lose you. I knew it." The words just came. They were a torrent, a confession she didn't know she held. I can't lose anyone else." She wept, her tears falling onto his bloody chest. "I left my home, my mother's grave. I left everything. I thought if I had nothing, I couldn't lose anything." She looked at him, at his pale, beautiful, terrible face. "And then you were just here, and I knew they would take you, too. They always take everything." She was breaking, the part of her that had survived Arthur, the part that had survived the stagecoach, the part that had faced the snow. It was all crumbling. "I think I only feel whole when I'm broken," she choked out. "Arthur, he broke me. He broke me so many times. I think I learned to live there, in the pain, because it was all I had. And when you were kind, when you gave me the peach, it hurt worse, because I knew it wouldn't last." She was admitting the most terrible secret of her soul, that she was a creature of her own misery, that she only felt real when she was afraid. "I'm so afraid," she whispered. She expected him to grunt, to tell her to be quiet, to tell her to fight. He didn't. His hand, the scarred one, came up. It was trembling and slick with his own blood. He didn't touch her face. He cupped the back of her head, his fingers tangling in her hair, just as he had done before. He pulled her down, gently, until her forehead was resting against his skin clammy and cold. "Lily!" His voice was a rasp, thick with pain, but it was clear. "You were never broken." She shook her head, a sob catching in her throat. "No," he insisted. He took a sharp, painful breath. "Listen, you were shaped by cruel hands, by stupid, weak men." He was fighting for the words. A pot is shaped by the potter, but it is not broken. It is made. You were made, strong." He pulled his head back, forcing her to look at him. His dark eyes were intense, burning with a feverish light, willing her to understand. "This," he whispered, "this is not his story." He meant Arthur. "This is your story. You are in your own story. Lily, and you are not broken." His words hit her. They were a physical blow, more real than the bullets thudding against the logs. Your story. She was not a victim in Arthur's. She was the hero of her own. She looked at his wound, the bleeding. It was slowing. Her pressure, the cold. It was slowing. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice fierce. "You stay with me. Nash 10 Crow. You don't get to say that and then leave." "Not leaving." He breathed. The shooting had quieted. They were planning. They were getting the oil. They were waiting for dark. She looked at him. This man who was bleeding out on her furs. This man who had seen her, really seen her, and had not found her broken. He had found her strong. The cabin was a tiny, dark, bloody world. Outside, death was waiting. Inside was life. It was here. It was now. It was all they had. She leaned down. She kissed him. It was not the gentle, exploratory kiss of before. This was salt and blood and desperation. It was a promise. He kissed her back, his strength surprising her. His hand moved from her hair, down her back, pulling her against his good side. It was slow. It was trembling. It was gentle. There, in the dim, smoky-smelling cabin, with a dozen men outside waiting to kill them, they made love. It was not an act of passion. It was an act of rebellion. It was a desperate, tender, silent, "I am alive." It was a moment of impossible peace in the heart of chaos. She was clumsy and shy and terrified of hurting him. He was gentle, his hands and mouth telling her things his words never could. He held her. He looked at her. He saw her. And for the first of time in her life, Lily Crawford felt whole, not broken, not shaped, just whole. Afterward, they lay on the furs, tangled together. The cabin was quiet. The posse was quiet. It was the deep, waiting dark. She was tucked against his good side, her head on his shoulder. His breathing was shallow, but steady. He was alive. She listened to the men, their voices muffled. They were arguing. They were cold. They were scared of the man inside. She turned her head, whispering against his skin. It was warm. "They're afraid of you," she said. He was silent. You've always been feared, haven't you? The town, the miners, everyone." She felt him nod, a small movement. She rose up on one elbow, looking down at his face in the dying firelight. His eyes were closed, his face drawn with pain, but he was watching her from under his lashes. She touched his face, her fingers tracing the high cheekbone. "You deserve to be loved," she whispered. The words were a revelation, even to her, not feared. "You deserve to be loved." His eyes opened fully. He looked at her, and she saw it. She saw the walls, the ones he had built out of stone, and silence, and loss. She saw them crack. She saw the 8-year-old boy watching his mother. She saw the 12-year-old boy hiding in the canyon. He didn't speak. He just pulled her closer, his hand burying itself in her hair. He held her. He just held her. And as the men outside lit their first torch, Nash 10 Crow's walls, the ones that had kept the entire world out, began to truly fall. The world outside was a graveyard. The posse, cold, defeated, and now diminished, had taken their dead and living and retreated into the falling dusk. They had left 2 bodies. Men Lily did not know, their faces frozen in ugly masks of hate, now just meat covered in snow. The posse's shouts about fire had died, their will broken by Lily's rifle shot and the 2 men Nash had taken down before he fell. They had come for an easy hanging, not a war. Lily barred the door. The adrenaline drained away, leaving a cold, vast terror. Nash was dying. "Water," he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. She scrambled, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the dipper. The cabin was a wreck. Bullets had torn through the walls, splintering wood, shattering her water pots, but 1 bucket remained. She brought it to him. He was pale, his skin clammy and cold, but his eyes were locked on her. He had not looked away. "You're not broken," he had said. She clung to the words. She tore the last of her petticoats into bandages. She washed the wound. It was ugly. The bullet had gone in his side, high, and she prayed it had missed his lungs. She had no whiskey for cleaning, only boiled water, laced with the herbs he kept in a pouch. He hissed as she worked, his body rigid, but he did not cry out. "This is going to hurt," she said, her voice a flat, dead thing. "It hurts already." He breathed. She packed the wound. She bound his ribs, tightly, her hands learning a new, desperate skill. He was on her furs, the ones they had shared. They were stained with his blood. The first night, the fever came. He began to burn. He thrashed, his strong body fighting an invisible enemy. He spoke, not to her, but to ghosts. "Sarah," he moaned, the name a raw wound. "Sarah, the rope, no." Lily's heart clenched. Sarah, his mother, the locket. She bathed his face with snow water. She held his hand. "I'm here, Nash. It's Lily. I'm here. You are not alone." He mumbled in a language she did not know. Sharp, guttural sounds of pain. Then English. "Shy. Be the stone. The stone doesn't feel." "He was wrong," she whispered, her tears hot on his cold hand. "You have to feel me, stay with me." For 3 days, he was in the fire, and Lily became someone else. She was no longer the protected. She was the protector. The fear that had defined her was still there, but it was no longer her master. It was fuel. She had to get food. He was weak, burning through his own strength. Broth. She needed meat. She took his rifle. She took Jed's rifle, too, leaving it by the door. She checked the loads. Her hands steady now. She unbarred the door and stepped out into the bright, cold world. The 2 bodies were still there, half covered in new snow. She looked at them. She felt nothing. No pity, no remorse. They had come to kill him. They had come to take her. She turned her back on them and walked toward the trees, his rifle in her hand. She hunted. She was clumsy. She scared off 2 rabbits, her movements too large, too loud. She wept in frustration, the tears freezing on her cheeks. "You have to," she told herself. "You have to." She remembered what he taught her. Breathe out, squeeze. She saw another, a snowshoe hare, white against the white, visible only by its dark, knowing eye. She raised the rifle. She breathed. She squeezed. The shot was a sacrilege in the perfect, cold silence. The hare jumped, then lay still. She ran to it, her heart pounding. She had taken a life. She cried, but she picked it up. It was warm. It was life, for him. She brought it back. She skinned it, her stomach churning, her hands covered in blood. She did it. She made a thin, hot broth. She forced it between his lips, spoonful by spoonful. "You will drink this," she commanded. "You will not leave me. I will not let you." She tended the wounded mare, too. The animal was starving, but healing. Lily brought her water. She dug under the snow to find dried grass. The mare, who had been wild, now let Lily touch her. She knitted her hand, a silent, grateful bond. On the 4th day, Nash's fever broke. She was dozing, her head on the edge of the furs, exhausted, when his hand touched her hair. Her head snapped up. He was looking at her. His eyes were clear. They were weak and full of pain, but they were him. "Lily," he whispered. She choked on a sob, throwing her arms around his neck, careful of his side. "You're back, you're back." He held her, his grip weak, but there, he looked past her. He saw the skinned rabbit, the neat stack of firewood she had hauled in, the second rifle by the door. He looked at her hands, raw and chapped, stained with dirt and dried blood. He looked at her face, thin, fierce, and streaked with soot. He saw what she had done. He saw the woman who had faced down Apache, hunted in the snow, and dragged him back from the dead. My protector, he breathed. The words were full of a wonder, an awe that broke her heart. He recovered slowly. The thaw came, a miserable, muddy mess. The world turned from white to brown. The bodies of the two men, she could not leave them. With Nash too weak to help, she did the only thing she could. She dragged stones, one by one, from the canyon wall and built a cairn over them. It was a grim, hard task. It took 2 days. It was a monument to their new life. With the thaw came the news. It traveled on the tongues of trappers, spread from the saloon in Blackthorn Ridge. The story was twisted into something ugly. The half-breed, Nash Ten Crow, had gone mad. He had abducted the mail-order bride, held her captive, and when good men from town had gone to rescue her, he and the now-fallen woman had ambushed them. Murdered too. A bounty was placed on his head, $100, dead or alive. Lily found the notice. She had ridden the mare, now strong enough to carry her, near the edge of town, just to see. She had seen it nailed to the stagecoach post. His name, the price. She rode back to the cabin, her heart a cold stone. He was outside, leaning against the cabin wall, his face turned to the weak sun. He was stronger, but he still favored his side. "We have to go," she said, sliding off the mare. She didn't have to show him the paper. He saw it in her face. "A bounty," he stated. "Yes, $100. She was frantic, grabbing his arm. "We have to run, now. While you can still ride, we can go north, into the high country, where they won't look." He looked at her, and his face was calm. It was a calm that frightened her more than any anger. "No," he said. "No? What do you mean, no? Nash, they will come. Not just a posse, bounty hunters, men who kill for money. They will track you. They will kill you, and they will take me. We have to run." "I am done running." He said it so quietly. She almost missed it. He looked out at the canyon, at the land that was just beginning to show hints of green. "I have been running my entire life," he said, his voice flat. "I ran from my mother's hanging. I ran from my father's murder. I ran from the soldiers, and I ran from the tribes. I ran until I was nothing but a shadow. Running made me no one." He turned to look at her, his eyes deep and full of a pain she had only glimpsed in his fever. "I will not run from this land. This is the only place my feet feel the earth. The only place I am me. I will not leave it again." She stared at him, aghast. "So you will just die here? You will let them come and hang you from that tree, after everything, after I will not run," he repeated. It was final. She wanted to scream. She wanted to hit him. He was the most stubborn, infuriating, impossible man she had ever met. He would choose death over flight. She had run her whole life to survive. He was standing his ground to live. She paced the small clearing in front of the cabin, her mind racing. If they couldn't run, if they wouldn't run, then what? They couldn't just wait for the bounty hunters. She stopped. She looked at him. He was watching her, his face grim, but steady. He was waiting for her to understand. And she did. If they were going to stand, they would stand. But not as fugitives. Not as a man and his fallen woman, cowering in a den. She walked to him. She stood directly in front of him, so close she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "All right," she said, her voice shaking, but firm. "We don't run. We stand. But not like this." He frowned. "Lily? Marry me, Nash." He blinked. Of all the things he expected, it was not this. He actually took a step back, stunned. "Marry? You mean a preacher? The law?" He laughed, a short, bitter sound. "The law is what put a price on my head. A piece of paper from a judge in Blackthorn Ridge? What good is that?" "No," she said, grabbing his shirt, holding him. "No, not for them, not for the town, not for the law. To hell with the law, And to hell with the town." His eyes searched her face. "I mean for us," she said, her voice dropping, fierce and low. "As a promise that we are choosing this, that we are choosing each other. Let the world say what it wants. Let them call me your woman. Let them call me your captive. I do not care. I am your woman. I am your wife. I want to say it, to you, to the sky, to the stone. I want to make a promise that is stronger than their laws, and stronger than their bullets." He stared at her, his mouth parted. He saw the truth in her. This was not an act of fear. It was the ultimate act of defiance. It was her, standing her ground, too. He reached up, his scarred hand touching her cheek. "A promise," he said, the words thick. "Yes, a promise." He knew people. He was not, as the town believed, utterly alone. He had connections to the world his mother and father had come from. He rode out, not on his horse, but on the dun mare. He was gone for a day and a night. Lily stayed, cleaning the rifles, her heart in her throat, trusting him. He returned, and he was not alone. 2 men rode with him. One was very old, his face a map of deep lines, his long gray hair in braids. He was Apache, a Dian, a medicine man. His name was Gochi, which Nash translated simply as "he who listens." He had known Nash's father. His eyes were ancient and held no judgment. The other was a man in his middle years, with the dark hair of the tribes but the pale eyes of a white man. He wore a simple black coat, worn at the elbows. He was Joseph Elias, a mixed-blood preacher who rode a circuit between the forgotten settlements, the reservations, and the mining camps, speaking of a God that did not belong to just one race. They did not go to the cabin. Nash led Lily on his own horse up a high, narrow trail she had never seen. It opened into a hidden canyon, a bowl of red rock, sheltered from the wind. A few ancient, twisted pines grew from the walls. It was a natural cathedral. The ceremony was not like any she had ever imagined. It was raw. It was real. The preacher, Joseph, stood before them. "We are gathered here," he said, his voice quiet. "Not under the law of towns, not in a house built by hands, but under the law of God and this land, which sees no color, only spirit. We are here to join 2 souls who have found in each other a home." The old man, Gochi, stepped forward. He lit a bundle of sage, and the sweet, sharp smoke washed over them. He chanted, his voice a low, beautiful, rattling sound. Joseph translated the elder's words. He says, "You are 2 parts of a whole, broken by the world. Today, you become one." He says you, Nash, you walk in 2 worlds. This is a great burden and a great gift. It makes you a bridge. And you, Lily, you are the stone on the other side. You make the bridge complete. Together, you can cross any divide. They had no rings. Nash had nothing. But Lily, she had taken the silver locket from his neck as he slept. She had opened it. Inside was a tiny, faded tintype of a beautiful, blonde-haired woman, Sarah. She held it out to him. This is your past, your mother. I don't want to replace it. I want to add to it." She opened her hand. In it lay a lock of her own brown hair, tied with a thread from her skirt. Nash looked at the locket, at her, his eyes shining. He took her lock of hair and, opening the locket, placed it gently beside his mother's picture. He closed it. "My past," he said, his voice thick, "and my future." He put the locket back, not around his own neck, but around hers. It was warm from his skin. It settled between her breasts, a heavy, precious weight. "I have nothing," he said, his voice raw. "You have me," she whispered. Joseph Elias smiled. "By the power vested in me, by God, and by this land, and by the promise you have made, I pronounce you husband and wife." Nash turned to her. He did not kiss her as he had in the cabin. He kissed her as a husband. He kissed her with reverence, with promise, and with a strength that made her knees weak. They were married. They rode back, not to the cabin, but to a high ledge overlooking the canyon. The two men left them, riding back into the hills. Lily and Nash sat on the rock, watching the sun set. They were no longer running. They were planning. "We cannot stay at the cabin," he said. "It is too exposed, too many ghosts." "Where, then?" she asked, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Higher, deeper. There is a valley I know, 2 days' ride from here. Water runs all year, good grass, hidden by the mountains. The Apache call it the place of quiet hearts. We can build a real house, not a shack." She smiled. "And do what? Hide?" "No," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Not hide, live." He took her hand. "The mare, she is strong. She is a survivor. Like you. We can start with her. We can catch the wild ones. Breed them. A horse ranch. Horses. They don't care what blood a man has. They only care if his hand is true. A ranch, a home, a life. It was a fragile, impossible, beautiful dream." Lily closed her eyes, and for the first time, she saw a future. They stayed that night with Joseph Elias, who was camped in a lower ravine. The preacher shared his fire and his food. Gochi had moved on. As they sat by the fire, Joseph spoke, his voice low. "The bounty is a bad thing, Nash, but the world is changing. There is a new sheriff in Stone Creek." Stone Creek was the next town over, larger than Blackthorn. The county seat. He is bringing law, or his version of it. "A sheriff?" Nash asked, his voice casual. But Lily felt him tense beside her. "Yes, a man named Calvin Reed. A hard man. Comes from up north. I think he was a soldier, or maybe a raider. Some say he has no love for the tribes, and less for men like us." Joseph, the mixed blood, looked into the fire. "He speaks of cleansing the territory, of civilizing it. He's rounding up men on old warrants. He's powerful." Lily felt Nash go still. It was not a normal stillness. It was the stillness of a snake before it strikes. It was the stillness of the stone. "Calvin Reed," Nash said, his voice flat, empty. "You know him?" Joseph asked. Lily looked at her husband. His face was a mask, carved from granite in the firelight. The man who had been planning a life with her seconds before was gone. In his place was the Shadow Walker, the man from the fever dreams. "Nash?" she whispered. "What is it?" He lied. For the first time, he lied to her. He put his arm around her, pulling her close. "Nothing, just tired. The wound aches." But she knew. She knew. Later, they lay in the bedrolls the preacher had lent them. Lily slept, exhausted from the emotion of the day, her hand resting on his chest, on the locket that now held her hair. Nash did not sleep. He stared into the darkness. Calvin Reed. The name was a ghost. The name was a rope. The name was a bullet. It was the man with the torch. The man who had laughed as his mother, as Sarah. It was the man who had shot his father in the back. He had thought him dead, lost to the small, bloody wars of the frontier. But he was here. He was not just a man. He was the law. He had a badge. He was civilizing. He was empowered to continue the work he had started all those years ago. All his plans for their new life, the ranch, the quiet valley, it was all dust. It was a dream built on a poisoned foundation. As long as Calvin Reed lived, as long as that man's shadow lay over the land, there would be no place of quiet hearts. His mother's ghost would never rest. He would never be free. He looked at Lily. She was so strong. She was his wife. He could not, would not, drag her into this. This was his, not hers. This was the one hunt he had to make alone. He had to sever the root, He had to cut out the poison. He had to face his past, so they could have a future. He waited until her breathing was deep and even. He kissed her hair, a whisper of a touch. He gently, so gently, lifted her hand from his chest. He rose like a shadow. He dressed in the dark. He picked up his rifle, his knife. He looked at her one last time. A long, agonizing look. I am doing this for you, so you can be free. He slipped out of the camp, silent as the night wind. He saddled his horse. He did not ride north, toward their valley. He rode west, toward Stone Creek, toward the law, toward Sheriff Calvin Reed. Lily woke to the cold. It was not the cold of the air, but the cold of the space beside her. The bedroll was empty. The sheepskin coat was gone. She sat bolt upright, her heart a cold, heavy stone in her chest. The locket, their locket, was a heavy weight against her skin. The fire was banked, but it was low, the way one left a fire when they were not coming back soon. No, the word was a whisper. No, you don't. She scrambled out into the gray, pre-dawn light. Joseph Elias was already awake, tending his own small fire, a coffee pot balanced on the stones. He looked up, and his face was full of a sad, deep pity. He did not have to say a word. He's gone. Lily said it was not a question. He rode west. Child, Joseph said, his voice gentle. An hour ago, toward Stone Creek. He asked me to look after you, to see you safe to the high valley. He lied, she whispered, the betrayal a sharp, acid taste. He lied to me. He went to finish a thing, Joseph said, standing. A thing from long before you. A man's ghost. He believes he must do it alone, to keep you clean of it. Clean? Lily's voice was sharp, a sudden whip-crack of anger. She ran to the dun mare, her mare. He is my husband. There is no part of him I am not part of. His ghosts are my ghosts. Lily, wait, Joseph called, as she began to saddle the horse, her hands moving with a frantic, desperate speed. That is not a town for him. Not now. And that man, Reed, he is the law. I am his wife, she said, her voice shaking with a cold fury. She checked the cinch, her movements hard, precise. She grabbed the rifle Nash had left for her. She grabbed a strip of jerky. That is the only law I know. It's a 2-day ride, and the sky, a storm is coming, a late one. It's dangerous. She swung onto the mare's back, her face a pale, determined mask. It is more dangerous to let him go alone. She kicked the mare and the horse. Sensing the urgency, leaped forward. She rode west into the rising, bitter wind. She rode. She did not follow the road. She followed the tracks. Nash's horse, a big, powerful gelding, left a clear trail in the half-thawed mud. She pushed the mare hard, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. You will not die. You will not leave me. I will not let you. The landscape was treacherous. She cut through ravines still choked with old, icy snow. She forded streams that were high and brown with the melt, the freezing water soaking her boots, climbing to her knees. The mare scrambled up shale-slick slopes, her breath pluming. By midday, the storm Joseph had promised turned the sky from a watery gray to a bruised, heavy purple. The wind began to howl, and the snow came. Not the soft flakes of early winter, but a horizontal, granular assault of ice that stung her face and blinded her. She pulled her scarf over her nose, lowered her head, and kept going. She was a hunter now. She was tracking the only thing in the world that mattered. She was tracking her own heart. The mare stumbled, going to her knees in a snow-filled wash. Lily was thrown, hard, against the frozen bank. Pain shot up her arm. For a moment, she lay there, the wind screaming in her ears, the snow covering her, the temptation to just stop, to lie down, to let the cold take her. It was so easy. She thought of Arthur. She thought of the woman in the stagecoach, weak, frightened, vanished. "No!" she grunted, pushing herself up. Her arm throbbed, but it was not broken. She grabbed the mare's reins. "Get up! Get up!" She pulled the horse to its feet. She pulled herself back into the saddle. She was no longer cold. She was a single, burning point of will. She would not let him face his past without her. She would not let him die alone. She rode through the storm. She rode through the night, a frozen, relentless ghost, following tracks that were almost invisible, trusting the instincts he had taught her, trusting the mare. In the cold, clear dawn of the next day, she saw it. Stone Creek. It was a proper town, with 2-story wooden buildings, a courthouse, and a wide, muddy main street. It was a place of law. Nash had arrived hours before. He had walked his horse down the center of the street, not a man on the run, but a man arriving for an appointment. He did not look like a fugitive. He looked like an executioner. His face was calm, his eyes empty. He tied his horse outside the building marked Sheriff Calvin Reed. He walked inside. The office was warm. A pot-bellied stove glowed in the corner. A man sat behind a large oak desk, a star pinned to his vest. He was a big man in his 50s, with a thick neck and pale, satisfied eyes. He was reading a report. "Office is closed," the man said, not looking up. "Come back at—" "Calvin Reed," Nash said. The voice, quiet, cold, made the sheriff stop. He looked up. His eyes scanned Nash. He saw the high cheekbones, the black hair, the set of his jaw, the sheriff's face, which had been bored, slowly changed. It was not recognition. It was something else, a faint, ugly amusement. "Well, now," Reed said, leaning back in his chair. "What kind of half-breed walks into my office on his own 2 feet? "You don't remember me," Nash stated, "but you will. I don't make a habit of remembering every thing I run across," Reed said, his hand moving to rest on the pistol at his hip. "You got a name?" "My mother was Sarah," Nash said, his voice flat. Reed's expression tightened. The amusement vanished. "My father was Ten Crow." Sheriff Calvin Reed's face went pale, then flushed a dark, mottled red. He stood up slowly, his chair scraping the floor. "I'll be damned. Little Nash. What was it? Shadow Boy? The one who ran, hiding in the creek?" He laughed. A short, ugly bark. "I thought you'd be dead. I thought the coyotes would have picked you clean years ago." "You were wrong," Nash said. "So I was." Reed's confidence returned. He was the law. He had the badge. "And now you're here. What is it? You come to turn yourself in? I heard there's a bounty on you over in Blackthorn. Killed some white men, they say. Seems the blood finally told." "I came for you," Nash said. "For me?" Reed laughed again, louder this time. "For what? You gonna arrest me, boy? You gonna— What? You think you can touch me? I am the law. I'm the man who brought civilization to this territory. I'm the man who— "You're the man who hanged a white woman from a tree because she loved an Apache," Nash said, his voice dropping, vibrating with a controlled, white-hot fury. "You're the man who led a mob. You're the man who called her a traitor." "She was a traitor," Reed roared, his face contorting. "To her race, to her God. She was filth, and she got a filthy end. I gave her justice." "And my father," Nash continued, his voice dangerously quiet. "You shot him, when he was unarmed, in the back." "He was a savage," Reed yelled. "An animal, and you're just like him. You're cursed blood. Boy, you're the stain that decent folk like me are sworn to wipe out. And you just walked right in. Saved me the trouble of hunting you." Reed's hand was on his gun. "I'm taking you in, Nash, for the bounty, and for being who you are. and I expect you'll resist. Not in here, Nash said. Outside, in the street, where they can all see. See what? Reed sneered. See me put down a rabid dog? See the law, Nash said. Your law. He turned and walked out of the office. Reed, his face purple with rage at the half-breed's audacity, grabbed his hat and followed. The town was waking up. A few people were on the boardwalks. They saw their sheriff stride into the street. They saw the tall, dark-haired man standing 20 paces away, his hand loose at his side. They stopped. They watched. This was a duel. You got no right, boy, Reed shouted, his voice echoing in the cold street. This ain't no duel. This is an arrest. Draw, Nash said. You draw on me. And it's suicide. Reed's hand was hovering over his pistol. He was confident. He had killed men. He was the law. You murdered my mother, Nash said, his voice clear, carrying to the onlookers. His name is Calvin Reed. He hanged Sarah 10 Crow. The townspeople murmured. They knew their sheriff was a hard man. They hadn't known this. You shot my father in the back. Nash continued, his voice a judgment. He claims he is the law. He is just a murderer, with a badge. Shut your mouth, Reed screamed, his composure gone. He was being undone in front of his town. You are cursed blood. He was fast, for a big man, but he was driven by rage. He was sloppy. Nash was driven by 40 years of pain. He was driven by justice. He was driven by Lily. He was not sloppy. He was a stone. He was the water. He was free. Reed's gun fired, a bullet screaming, tearing through the flesh of Nash's left thigh. The impact spun him, pain flaring, hot and sharp. Nash did not go down. He planted his foot. He raised his pistol. He breathed out. He squeezed. His shot was true. It struck Calvin Reed square in the chest, just above the badge. The sheriff looked down, a look of profound, stupid surprise on his face. He looked at Nash. He opened his mouth. No sound came out. He crumpled into the muddy, frozen street. He did not move again. Silence. The whole town of Stone Creek stood frozen, watching. The body of the law was dead in the street, and his killer, bleeding, was still standing. Nash stood, the smoke curling from his pistol. His leg was on fire. He looked at the man who had haunted his every breath, his every dream. He was just a man, a dead man. He felt nothing. No, not nothing. He felt quiet. The ghosts were gone. It was done. He holstered his pistol. He tried to take a step. His leg buckled. The pain, now that the fight was over, rushed in. A black, sickening wave. He leaned against a hitching post, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The townspeople just stared. They were afraid. They were ashamed. They had watched a murder or an execution and had done nothing. They did not move to help their sheriff. They did not move to arrest his killer. It was into this silence that Lily rode. She came in at a gallop. The mare lathered, her own face wild with terror and exhaustion. She saw the crowd. She saw the body in the street, and she saw him. Nash! Her scream tore the air. It was a sound of such agony that the townsfolk flinched. She threw herself from the mare before it had even stopped. Stumbling, running across the muddy street, she fell to her knees in front of him, her hands grabbing his coat. You're hit! You're hit! Oh, God, again! She saw the blood pumping from his thigh, staining the snow-patched mud. Lily, he breathed, his voice a thin thread. He looked at her, his eyes full of disbelief. You came. I told you I would, she sobbed, her hands moving, frantic, to the wound. You idiot, you stubborn, foolish, wonderful man. You came alone. He's gone, Nash whispered, his hand coming up to touch her hair. The ghost, He's gone. Lily, we're free. And then, his strength gone, his past finally exorcised, he collapsed. He fell into her arms, his full weight a dead, heavy thing. Lily caught him, her small body straining, lowering him gently into the mud. She held his head in her lap, his blood staining her skirts. She looked at his pale, unconscious face, and then she looked up. She looked at the ring of silent, watching faces. The men, the women, of Stone Creek. They were just staring, like he was a spectacle. A rage, pure and cold, rose in her. "Help me!" she screamed, her voice raw. "Don't just stand there. Get a doctor. He is bleeding. Help him." An old man stepped forward. "Ma'am, he just killed the sheriff." "He executed a murderer!" Lily shrieked, her voice cracking. "I don't care what you saw. This is not a savage. This is not an animal. This is my husband." She spat the word, a defiant claim. "His name is Nash 10 Crow, and he is my husband. Are you going to let him die in the street?" The silence stretched. Her words, husband, they hung in the air. This was not a fallen woman. This was a wife. A woman in an apron finally moved. "Elias, run! Get Dr. Miller! Tell him to come!" The spell was broken. People moved. Men came forward, their faces grim, but no longer hateful. They saw a wife holding her wounded husband. They saw a man, not a breed. "Let's get him inside," one of them said. "Into the doc's office." They lifted him, gently. Lily never let go of his hand. She walked beside them, her head high, her eyes daring any of them to say a word. She had claimed him, and the town, in its fear and shame, had accepted it. The doctor stitched him up. The bullet had gone clean through. He had lost blood, but he would live. The ride back to Blackthorn Ridge was slow. Joseph Elias meeting them on the road, his face a mixture of relief and awe. Nash was tied to his horse, weak but awake. When they rode down the main street of Blackthorn, the atmosphere had shifted. Jed Hicks was outside the saloon. He saw them. He saw Lily, her face set, her rifle on her lap. He saw the wounded, quiet man she was leading. Jed turned, his face pale, and went back inside. Elias Thorne, the saloon owner, stood on his boardwalk. He did not move. He just watched. His posse was broken. His power was gone. The agent at the general store, the man who had first offered Lily a job serving, came out. He looked at Nash. He looked at Lily. He looked at the locket on her chest. He nodded. A small, stiff, jerky motion. No one spoke. No one apologized. No one interfered. The bounty notice was gone from the stagecoach post. The death of a sheriff, it seemed, had overshadowed the murder of 2 drunk posse members. The law had eaten itself. The silence of hatred, the heavy, suffocating weight, was gone. In its place was just silence. Spring came. It came not as a gentle thaw, but as a flood of life, a rush of green so bright it hurt the eyes. They left the small cabin in the canyon. They left its ghosts. They packed their few belongings onto the horses and rode north, into the high country. They found it, the place of quiet hearts. It was a valley, hidden and green, with a creek that ran clear and cold. Wildflowers, lupine and primrose and paintbrush, were just beginning to bloom, a carpet of purple and yellow and red. They began to build. It was slow work. Nash's leg healed, but he was left with a limp, a permanent, dragging reminder of the cost. He moved slower, but he did not stop. He cut the pine. He laid the stone. He worked with a quiet, steady peace Lily had never seen in him. She worked beside him. She daubed the chinking. She planted a small garden. She tended the mare, and the 2 new fillies they had captured, the start of their ranch. And she grew. Her own body, which had been thin and hard, softened. A new life was growing inside her. They sat on the porch of their new cabin. It was not a shack. It was a proper house, with 2 rooms and a real, solid porch. The sun was warm. The air smelled of pine and damp earth. Nash was leaning back in a chair he had built, his eyes closed, his face turned to the sun. His limp was heavy today. Lily sat beside him, shelling peas from her garden. She looked at him, at the lines of peace around his eyes, at the way the sun lit the silver in his black hair. She smiled, a slow, secret smile. "It is a very nice house," she said, her voice light. "Sturdy, well built." He grunted, his eyes still closed. "But," she continued, "I must admit, I still think that first cabin, this is the smallest I've seen." His eyes opened. He looked at her. It was," she finished, her voice full of a teasing, gentle laugh. "A tiny little thing." A slow smirk spread across his face, the same smirk from that first night, but this time, it was not bitter, it was not knowing, it was just happy. He did not answer her. He just reached out, grabbed her hand, and pulled her, laughing and protesting, out of her chair and onto his lap. He wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in her hair, his body shaking with a quiet, gruff laughter. She settled against him, her head on his shoulder, his arms a safe, strong wall around her and the new life she carried. This time there was no door between them. Weeks later, she sat at the small table he had made, a pen and paper in her hand. The stage to Prescott now ran a route close enough for Joseph Elias to carry mail. She was writing to her cousin, back in Missouri. "My dearest Eliza," she wrote, "you must not worry for me. I know my father told you I had vanished, that this land would swallow me whole. In a way, he was right. I did vanish, but only the parts of me that were scared, the parts that were small, the parts that belonged to other people." She paused, looking out the window. She saw Nash, his limp heavy, walking with the dun mare, whistling a low, tuneless song. He was home. "What's left," she continued, dipping the pen in the ink, "is something new. It is something I have built, with my own hands. It is something strong. It is mine, and it is something no one is ever taking away." Thank you for listening to our story. Please comment where you are listening from so you can connect with others. Subscribe to the From Wild West channel, and share your thoughts in English.